Most people do not understand ketogenic macros, so let's get into it. Welcome everyone, welcome to my very humble channel. Now I want to talk about ketosis, keto explain, ketogenic macros, and I was going through some videos online and I saw Dr. Westman, who's a big proponent of a ketogenic diet, and then also him reviewing or analyzing Paul Saladino, who believes in carbs now. The problem is that most of the studies were done so long ago, and even today people still do not have the macros correct. You've got to have 80% fat starting at 200, and you want to have at least 5% carbohydrate, and then you want to have 15% protein, and that would be moderate to low. If your protein's too high, if your fats are too low, you will see that if you use a glucometer, your numbers, your glucose is going to be too high, or your ketones might be too low, and you don't reap the benefits of adapting. Now, it takes a while to get into ketosis. In this study that I'm going to show you through Dr. Westman and Paul Saladino was a 17-day study. That's nothing. It takes almost a year to adapt with some people, because you have to change your lifestyle. You have to go to bed early. You have to watch cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone that we need. It wakes us up in the morning. If you're exercising, even when you digest food, you're going to release cortisol. That's not the problem. It's when you're constantly in a stress state. And I haven't met somebody who is not. I will do consultations with people and they'll say, I'm not stressed at all. I can find 5,000 ways that they're stressed, even down to the way that you sit, stand, walk, and move, even breathe. These all, if they're done incorrectly, how you use the body, cortisol up, ketones down, glucose dysregulated, no keto adaptation, even if you have your macros perfect, which again is the 80-15-5. What would that look like? If you're a woman, it would be under 75 grams of protein. In between, let's say 50 to 75. It depends on the individual, depends on if you're active. Then we have men, and they should have protein under 100. So that could be between 65 and 95, or 95 to 100. Once your protein goes higher, and you're doing that every single day, the ketones go like this. The vegetables you want to put in your diet really should be bitter cruciferous. Broccoli, cauliflower, asparagus, Brussels sprouts. Now, on occasion, you could have a little zucchini, or you could have a little bit of green beans, but the amount of carbohydrates is like a handful a day, or a handful every other day. Now, I've done videos talking about asparagus, which is high as a prebiotic fiber type of plant, which helps to stabilize the gut microbiome. And that's why so many people have stool problems when they cut out all vegetables for a very long time. And I know that you can go and check out some of my podcast interviews where people are like, I had diarrhea for a year. So there's a lot to consider, and everyone is completely different. You want to have healthy meats, right? You want healthy animals. If you can, get free-range eggs. Now, some people can't afford it, so you just got to do your best. But grass-fed meats are always, your body's always going to respond better to a healthy animal. Even poor quality animals can affect the inflammatory response and block your keto adaptation. Stress, working out late, not working out at all, third shift night workers, arguing with mates or children, sitting, standing, well, all these things can block your keto adaptation. And that is why for the first 4 weeks, I'm like, you need to ramp down your workouts, you need to breathe, you need to go to bed early, and really get your body in a more calm state to keto adapt. But let's listen to Dr. Westman review Paul Saladino's belief that you need carbs. And unfortunately, he didn't do well So then he thinks that no one else can do well. But he hasn't interviewed me, because if he interviews me, I'm going to be contrary to his belief that you cannot be in ketosis for a long time because it's considered a stress. Well, that's if you don't adapt. Of course, if you don't adapt, hair falls out, you're going through this pregnenolone steal of your DHEA, and your reproductive hormones tank, thyroid tanks. All of those things can happen if you don't learn how to do this correctly and how to change your life. You have to be like a nun for the first 4 weeks at least. So let's check out Paul and his I hate these studies. They're so subjective. And then also the fact that he's like, oh, you could lose weight on carbs. Well, what if you have insulin issues? What if you have fructose issues? You can't make this stuff up, but let's check it out. Let's get into this. I'm going to do a breakdown of a doctor breaking down another doctor, and how Dr. Westman, who's done keto forever, makes a lot of great smart points. But Paul is missing the complete boat. He's missing the train. Let's get into it. I'm going to review Dr. Westman reviewing Saladino. Let's see what they got to say.
Doesn't represent a non-governmental organization like the American Heart Association. I mean, all these places have their own agendas and biases. So he's coming at it from his own personal experience, or is there more? So stay tuned. Let's see what Dr. Saladino has to say about why you should stop the keto diet.
What are the problems with the ketogenic diet, you say? Well, it's been shown pretty clearly that as you limit your carbohydrates, your cortisol goes up. Cortisol is a powerful stress hormone that has nothing good to do in the human body most of the time. If you're running from a tiger, yeah, cortisol is probably a good thing. If a crocodile is chasing me around the water while I'm surfing, cortisol is maybe good. But most of the time, you don't want your cortisol to be high. When you restrict your carbohydrates, in the study I'll show you, they restricted them to 4% of the macronutrient ratios. 11-beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase type 1, it's a mouthful. That's the enzyme that makes cortisol. The cortisol levels in the blood throughout the body in these individuals were known to be higher. So yes, eating a ketogenic diet raises your cortisol long-term. And why wouldn't it?
Well, so...
Okay. He's making this very hard black and white statement that ketogenic diets raise cortisol. And he's citing some stupid study that was done in like 2007 with 17 people. Especially at that time, nobody had their macros right. In fact, today people do not have their macronutrients correct. If you cut out your carbohydrates and you're not in ketosis, your body's going to go through stress. That's why I do so many videos explaining how to do a ketogenic diet in a more safe fashion so you can go through that transition and get into ketosis.
Time out. Cortisol is a chronic stress hormone. I mean, I agree. You don't.
Now, here's what they're leaving out. Cortisol is not a chronic. You need cortisol to wake up. So everything's like contextual. When you eat cortisol, insulin is going to spike. It's not all bad. It's bad when there's too much cortisol through physical stress.
Want it to be super high, but the fight or flight mechanism, that hormone is adrenaline or epinephrine, same thing. So I'm a little confused. If you're going to run away from the tiger or you know, from a car that's running you down, it's epinephrine and adrenaline that goes up immediately, and that gives you the fight or flight. And then the chronic stress is cortisol. So you wouldn't want that elevated long term. But now,
okay, the problem is that I'd say most people are definitely experiencing high cortisol because they do everything wrong. They'll drink alcohol on the weekends, which will just completely demolish their blood sugar stabilization. They will eat cheese and nuts and all these inflammatory foods. They'll fast on top of that. And that's why I can review 2 doctors who don't clarify enough, even though Westman is doing a better job of it. Paul has just missed the boat. Nowhere in nature were we eating all that fruit. Fruit was bitter before it's been genetically modified, hybridized, and selectively bred. And these points are not being mentioned.
but if it's your primary fuel system, it's your primary fuel system, not your backup. So again, a lot of paradigm shifts and changes. And if you're going to say that because times were hard, you go into ketosis, therefore ketosis is bad, I don't buy that anymore. I kind of understood that, and
I agree with him. It's illogical. Excuse me. I agree with him because it is illogical to do a ketogenic diet that's supposed to give you a backup source of fuel, and then that's supposed to be bad for you.
So if you're a carb eater and then you don't have food, it's your backup system. But if it's your primary fuel system, it's your primary fuel system, not your backup. So
exactly. And the point is getting yourself into ketosis. That is the problem. It's not being in ketosis all the time, because I've done this 16 years. It's getting into ketosis and doing all the things that you need to sustain that even level of being ketotic.
Again, a lot of paradigm shifts and changes. And if you're going to say that because times were hard, you go into ketosis, therefore ketosis is bad, I don't buy that anymore. I kind of understood that, and now the opposite makes sense to me.
It's perceived evolutionarily in our bodies as a stressful state. So
how is that? To be in ketosis? That's absurd. Based on some old study you read. See, the thing is, he didn't do well. And when that individual doesn't do well, he doesn't think other people should do well, or should be doing it as well. That's the problem. He's been coaching people and helping those girls, those two girls, the sisters, and they did carnivore and they had benefits, and then they had problems, and then he's spoken to people and had benefits and they have problems. If you're out there on the internet, you see immediately that people have their macros wrong. People are fasting. People are stressed out. They're working out late. They're not working out at all. They are eating keto products and junk food. All of that plays a role when you're trying to decide if a diet works or not.
So I would urge you to consider that you are upregulating one of the most powerful stress hormones that has aging effects in human physiology.
But the thing is, it looks like he's aged, and I'm not trying to be a hater. I know I sound passive aggressive, but let's keep it real.
When you were eating ketogenic diet. Also, as I mentioned earlier, methylglyoxal, an important advanced glycation end product, which doesn't look good for humans at all.
So advanced glycation end product is the damage of the protein lining of a cell. So it just gets damaged. And that's what makes you age. If you're constantly in this glycation or advanced glycation, or age as they call it, where the cells are being damaged because of cortisol, he's saying, or because you're in ketosis, he doesn't clarify.
Is upregulated by the ketogenic diet. So I'll show you both of those studies and then I'll move on and we'll really dig into carbohydrates a bit more. This is the study that I would suggest you check out if you're interested in cortisol and ketogenic diets. Dietary macronutrient content alters cortisol.
This is 2007. Nobody knew how to do this damn diet in 2007. And that plays a huge role.
Metabolism independently of body weight changes in obese men.
Now, you know, when I saw this, I wondered, when did Dr. Saladino write his book, The Carnivore? Well, it was, and when was this article? The article was in 2007 or 2008. It's already moved. Apparently, he didn't do a lot of due diligence before he wrote the book to say that this was so bad he wasn't going to write the book. But when I even look into this, there were 17 people in this study. And like most endocrinology studies, they have very few people involved. And then I don't think you can generalize anything from this study. It only had 17 people. And then
17 people, and what were the macros? What was their stress like? Yeah.
We're not even looking at unhealthy, like diabetes getting better, things like that. So I'm afraid it's a study that is being generalized, overblown.
As you can see here, they looked at 17 obese men, 4 weeks of ad libitum, meaning they could eat as much as they wanted, high fat, low carbohydrate, which is 66% fat, 4%.
But you're not supposed to eat 66% fat. You're supposed to eat 80% fat. And right there, whatever were doing. Were they eating cheese? Were they eating coconut oil? These are not ketogenic fats.
Carbohydrate, that's pretty ketogenic. or a moderate fat, moderate carbohydrate, which is 35% fat.
Moderate fat. Keto is short for ketone, which is a unit of fat, not moderate fat. This is high fat.
35% carbohydrate diet. Conclusions: a low carbohydrate diet, which is 4% carbohydrates in the study, alters cortisol metabolism independently of weight loss. In obese men, this enhances cortisol regeneration by 11-beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase type 1 and reduces cortisol inactivation by A-ring reductases in the liver without affecting subcutaneous adipose 11-beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase type 1. Alterations in cortisol metabolism may be a consequence of macronutrient dietary content and may mediate effects of diet on metabolic health.
Another thing we've learned through studies of low-carb diets is that there's a adaptation period. It's called keto adaptation, or on the internet, the term is.
And that adaptation period is everything. And I've always expressed to people it can take from 3, 6 to a year to get beyond that keto adaptation period, to keto adapt, essentially.
Keto flu, but I wish they wouldn't use that because most people don't get it, and it's not as serious as the flu for most people, or just about everyone. So this study is a 4-week study in 17 people with comparison group. But come on, I mean, we now know. I mean, even back in 2007, if you'd asked,
you don't have to be ketogenic to do that. As I've said in the past, I think the benefits of a ketogenic diet are in that it controls appetite. But if you think about the quality of your foods and you remove foods, specifically artificial sweeteners, like I talked about in the last podcast.
He has this concept that if you just remove the junk food, that you will lose weight. It just, and y'all, some of y'all get on my case for not being a doctor, but listen to this stuff. It's so incomplete.
Which will hijack your appetite and your insulin signaling, something that many people on ketogenic diets are still eating. High fructose corn syrup, as we'll talk about in this podcast, and seed oils, which will contribute to underlying insulin resistance. Your satiety will be better, and you can still lose weight and eat carbohydrates. I'll repeat that statement.
Yeah, I'd like to.
That's so ridiculous because some people have such bad insulin and blood sugar regulation they can't lose weight, and then their thyroid's jacked up. And he's leaving out all of that because he's not a doctor in any of those areas. So all he has is studies. I hate these studies. They're so stupid.
See the randomized trial on that
statement because it is so important. You can still lose weight. In fact, you can lose an equivalent amount of weight just improving your food quality and eating carbohydrates.
Nonsense. Do you know how many people I work with who eat perfectly well? Is grass-fed, like they don't overeat and they cannot lose weight because weight loss is about hormones.
Hydrates as you would on a ketogenic diet, and then you have all of the benefits of doing that, which are actually not getting the negatives of a ketogenic diet.
So now I'm wondering if Dr. Saladino has read much research at all. I mean, if he missed this one before writing a Carnivore, has he not read the meta-analyses of comparing low carb and low fat? And low carb wins just about every time in terms of weight loss. Not that a low fat diet can't work, and a lot of people lose weight with that, and there are a lot of ways to be healthy. But when they're compared head to head, you know, in a fair comparison, no, low carb really is superior for weight loss.
The conclusion is being fully adapted and working hard to maintain your keto adaptation is amazing. I mean, hypoglycemia again, right? Glycation of the skin, and bye-bye. But you have to be adapted. Glycation means aging, essentially. Advanced glycation end product where you're aging very quickly. But if you try to half-ass this stuff, it's not going to work. It is not going to work. Yeah. Me, myself, and I reviewing doctors. Dr. Westman, proponent of keto, great. But Paul Saladino is against it because he didn't do well. And that's how doctors can be completely subjective. So be very careful. Yeah. Because being adapted is amazing. It just takes a lot of work. If you guys want to learn more, go to stephanieperson.com, book a consultation. I can teach you how to do a carnivore diet and get into ketosis and reap the benefits. Also a keto omnivore diet, and if you just don't do well on these types of diets, then low carb, high fat might be your lane. And it's got to be done correct, or you can still have issues. Yes. Comment below. Tell me if you struggle with trying to adapt. Have you ever used a glucometer to test if your blood sugar spikes if you eat too much protein, which most people don't. And most people who get a glucometer and test and see that their blood sugar is spiking, they learn and realize very quickly they can't eat too much protein. Also, you can go to my Instagram, which is Stephanie Ketogenic. My Facebook is Stephanie the Business A Person. And I'm working on this house. And in this cold weather, it is cray-cray. But we're going to do this challenge in January. And I'm out. Peace.